When it comes to serious topics, I'm not really that good at conveying what I really want to, but with this video I really wanted to go over just a little bit of how odd and how completely retarded it is for Polygon's writer to say the things that he says about crunch time and how absolutely perfect and great it is. Crunch time is a very serious matter, and with things like crunch time, especially in the game industry, it's kind of important to allow yourself time to recover or do things to take a mental break. Otherwise, you'll just be overworked. I've been through my own crunch time, especially when I work inside of a car factory and we have to work 12 hours a day and we have to work them almost 7 days a week. And I mean, the check is good, but ultimately it just takes a toll on your body and your mental health and any social life that you may have had before then. People like Walt Williams, who is an industry veteran, thinks that crunch time is awesome, and for pretty much no good reason. The article that I present you with today is Why I Worship Crunch. An industry veteran tackles a controversial subject, and it's written by Walt Williams. This article serves as an opinion piece, but also as free advertising for his book Significant Zero, which this is an excerpt from. In it, he says, crunch, one of the most loathed words in our industry. It's that period of time in which a team must tighten their belts, buckle down, and work more than the standard 40-hour work week. During crunch, it's not uncommon to work 10 to 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Crunch can last a week, it can last 6 months. It drains you, literally sucks your life away. Time flies by and you have no idea where it went because you were locked in a dim room for a month, surviving on lattes and Cheetos, the pale glow of your monitor mirroring the fading light in your eyes. And you see in this article, he even demonizes it himself. He gives it some kind of life of its own. He continues, yes, crunch is that fun. And yeah, I'm going to capitalize crunch as if it were a proper noun because crunch is not some idle concept or construct of the human mind. Crunch is a demon lord hiding behind the no-charge Coke machine, laughing as you guzzle down those free sodas, knowing that each delicious slurp sells off tiny pieces of your soul, and that soon, so very soon, that bill's gonna come due and crunch will step out into the light and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth as the hope vanishes from your overly caffeinated eyes because you know this is all your fault. It was you who allowed this foul demon into your midst, and now your ass belongs to him. When I think about crunch, my heart races. It only takes an instant for my eyes to drift off into that 1,000-yard stare, and then it all comes rushing back. My head goes all swimmy, like I haven't slept in 48 hours. My tongue dries up, aching for the disgustingly sweet taste of Red Bull. My mouth wants to rage and howl and spit until designers and directors alike bow to my creative will. All hail crunch. Now that he's given you some context on what crunch really is, you start to see a little bit of how he starts to drift off into this fantasy world in this next part of the article. He states, there are many arguments against crunch. Crunch is exploitive, true. Employees feel their jobs are at risk if they resist the will of crunch, also true. And most damning of all, crunch isn't necessary. So true it hurts. But see, here's the kicker. He goes on to say, opponents of crunch claim it is avoidable. If our industry learned basic time management skills and exercised restraint, we could ship games on time and on budget without crunch's shadow ever crossing our door. It's true, all of it. Conveniently so. That tends to be the case with demons, even metaphorical ones. It's why they make such easy villains. You never have to give them a second thought. But nothing's ever as clear-cut as it seems. There's another side to crunch you can rarely hear over the sound of righteous indignation. Luckily, it's just you and me right now, all by our lonesome. No message boards or comment posts to get in our way. So let's turn down the lights and get to cuddling. Boy, that part was hard to read, because I'm about to whisper sweet truths in your ear. Oh boy, this is where the delusion sets in. It's only crunch if you don't want to do it. Crunch isn't a pandemic or a death march. It's not even exclusive to the games industry. If anything, Crunch is a natural occurrence brought on by the creative process. Driven by passion, artists give themselves entirely to their art. When art exists in a collaborative medium, crunch will always deal collateral damage. How much damage you personally sustain will always be inversely related to your investment in the project. You see, this is where I disagree with you, Walt Williams. You see, crunch time isn't good, and it is a death march. There's a lot of things that are wrong with giving yourself entirely to your art. I mean, some people will probably say that they like working on their art, but they just don't have enough time in their day. So they take a break and they take a step back and then they figure out some things, relax, watch a movie, some TV, hang out with some friends. And then when they get the opportunity, they go back to their art and then they complete it. Now, I know that this is different in the game industry, but even if deadlines have to be met, you can still just work your regular time unless you guys have been slacking off this entire time. And trust me when I say, crunch time is very real for people even like myself. For me, setting up a lot of videos in the near future, I need to work as hard as I can to get those done. But sometimes my schedule just doesn't allow for it. I got life to deal with. He continues, listen, someday you will find yourself crunching on someone else's project, hating every wasted second. You will rant and rage and pray to gods in which you don't believe, begging them to strike down this corrupt system so that something pure and good may grow in its place. Your prayers will go unheard, but take heart. You have not been forsaken. The system is not broken. It is, in fact, working exactly as designed. And here we just keep going down the rabbit hole of things that we think are right. He says, when you choose to enter a collaborative field, you become a cog in a machine. It is inevitable. You will work on a project you do not like under terrible conditions for miserable pay. When it happens, take comfort in the knowledge that you are not being melodramatic. Your situation is truly as bad as it seems. Afterward, once you've stopped feeling sorry for yourself, be happy with the fact that your sacrifice is helping bring someone else's vision to life. You may think the vision is terrible, and I'm sure it is, but even shitty ideas mean something to someone. If you find no pleasure in helping others achieve their shitty dreams, then you can always quit, or you can crunch hard, keep your wits about you, and try not to lose your head. If you manage that, someday you may get to be the asshole building their dreams on the backs of those less fortunate. Mr. Walt Williams, is it okay if I call you Mr.? Because it's getting a little sketchy there. You just said in your article, you can crunch hard, keep your wits about you, and try not to lose your head. And if you manage that, someday you may get to be the asshole building their dreams on the backs of those less fortunate? Are you saying that you like putting people down so that way you can achieve your vision by having them slave away at about 100 hours a week? That's absolutely terrible. I think you might be a terrible person. You see, Mr. Walt Williams, the difference between you and I is that my vision involves working with other people. You see, I don't require them to be at my beck and call at every hour of every day. In fact, if I ever need something done as soon as possible, like really quickly, then I'll let them know. But I still tell them, just take your time. Things are a lot better when you take time. And that's part of the problem in the video game industry is no one takes time anymore to make something good. That's why we got rushed out projects like No Man's Sky or unfinished projects like Mass Effect Andromeda, who just dropped support almost 5 months after it released. But let's go ahead and we got to get through this because this is a really long article. There's just a lot of things that he put into this opinion piece, if you want to call it that. He goes on to say, we only care about crunch when it doesn't work. It's easy to hate crunch when you don't like the end result. However, when crunch results in a game people love, then it wasn't crunch at all. It was passion. That's the lie we tell ourselves because it's the one you let us believe. Polish and innovation come at a cost. Not to you, of course. You'll only pay 60 bucks and not a dollar more because you lack the ability to measure the value of digital goods either through cost or effort. If we try to sell you $5 downloadable content, you'll attack us with negative reviews, claiming we're trying to nickel and dime you. But if we package our game with a plastic figure and book of concept art, you'll shell out an easy 100 because it's limited. It's this same mentality that allows you to say crunch is plaguing our industry while shouting masterpiece at games that laid waste to the hearts and minds of their developers. You're a bunch of fucking hypocrites, but it's okay. So are we. We're happy to crunch when we believe it'll pay off for us individually. There's a reason studio owners, creative directors, and people who drive Lamborghinis never complain about working too hard. It's only when the payout is less than the wager that we get pissy. You see, that's where I disagree with you, Mr. Walt Williams. You see, the videos that I make, they're not monetized. I don't expect people to watch them for money. I honestly don't. And as I say at the end of almost every video, if they want to support me in my efforts, then they're more than welcome to. But I'm not expecting to drive off in a Lamborghini or buy a big house. I'd like to move to Japan, to be honest with you, but even then, only through my own hard work do I ever want to reap the benefits of it. You see, I've skipped out on a lot of games in the past year because they just don't mean anything. They're not finished products, and like you said, they are trying to nickel and dime us. That's how anti-consumer this is. Sometimes it's not bad. I mean, given that you have a game like Overwatch where everything is completely cosmetic, but if you're going to nickel and dime me for additional parts of your game that should have been included, then that's where I start to question what you guys were doing the whole time or why it got cut because of time constraints, which I saw more of in the past than anything else. But now it's become a tradition at this point to just take out parts of the game and sell it as a season pass. In most recent memory, the one game that I can tell that was being screamed at masterpiece was Sonic Mania, which was undoubtedly one of the best games of the year, if I'm not mistaken. And that had everything in it. For the money that you spent for it, around 20 bucks, you got everything for that game. They didn't try to sell you more additional content from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Sonic CD levels or anything like that. They just gave you the game and they brought it to you at a price that they thought was reasonable. Now this is where we start to get into some creepy territory. Some of us actually like it. Here's a secret about growing up that no one tells you. When you're young, your body is basically a meth lab bubbling over with all sorts of hormones and strange chemical reactions. You don't realize it, but you're getting high on your own supply 24/7. And that's a weird way of putting it, but he goes on and says, everything you feel is vivid and intense and seems like it'll never end, but it does. In time, the hormones stop bubbling, the chemicals even out, and you become a more or less sane human being. The problem is, you never forget the high. Without it, you'll always feel less than you once were, as if you lost a vital part of your soul. You're going to chase that high for a long time. Booze, drugs, sex, love, work, art, anything that allows you to let go and give yourself completely, that's where you'll find it. There's nothing wrong with the high. The high is natural. The high is good. It's the chase that kills you. Crunch is my chase, and it leads me to a high that's like Vegas, Amsterdam, and Bangkok rolled into one. See, there are a few things I love more than being in a fight. It fills my need for power, pain, and righteous indignation. If I win, I'm a god. If I lose, I'm a martyr. What the fuck does that even mean? Do you understand what you just said? Both feel fucking stellar. No sir, there's nothing bad about a fight, and Crunch is a fight from start to finish. It's the entire development process condensed into a never-ending string of dust-ups, like in Game of Death starring Bruce Lee, except instead of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you're fighting tech, memory, art, design, publishers, players, reviewers, budgets, schedules, weekends, egos, studio closures, unpaid royalties, cultural relevance, the list goes on and on. When I worship at the unholy altar of Crunch, everything outside the work fades away. This is fucking creepy. By design, My world is reduced to where I sleep and where I work. Every day must be fast, focused, and above all else, homogenized. Give myself too much downtime, too much room to think, and I start asking questions like, why am I doing this to myself? So I lose myself in the routine. When every day is a rehash of what has been and a preview of what will be, they blend into one another. This creates an out-of-body effect, not unlike highway hypnosis. Soon, who I am becomes an abstract concept, a loose collection of character flaws and neurotic tendencies. Only then can my body become the vessel through which an impossible amount of work will be accomplished in a short amount of time. Guys, I am truly sorry that this is going on for so long, but he wrote a lot of shit in this article. He wrote a lot of things. Let's just get through this. We'll get through it together. As we've done before, we will get through this one. He goes on to say, I love it, except for when I hate it, but I can't hate it if I never stop. Even when I'm not crunching, I work too much. I've edited scripts in ICU rooms, responded to emails while begging lovers not to walk out the door, sent brainstorming lists during the birth of my child. I held my grandfather's hand while he passed away, then went into his office and wrote text for mission descriptions. None of this was expected of me. No one would have dared to ask. I did all these things for me. Work brings order to my world. When things get tough, I slide down into my job and disappear. I let my health, relationships, and responsibilities fall to the wayside. When I finally come up for air, there's a smoking crater where my life used to be. Instead of picking up the pieces to start again, I slip back down into the thick of it. This is how I cope. You see, even in this part of the article, Mr. Walt Williams, you admit that this is self-destructive. And I know that that's how you cope with it, is to just go back to work and act as if nothing else matters. But the thing is that you don't have to. You're doing it for the sake of having something to do. You're trying to justify your means of crunching to get away from all of the world's problems that you don't want to have to deal with. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with escapism, but when you're doing this to an unhealthy extent, that even by your own admission, being in an ICU room and responding to emails when you're with your significant other, or, sending brainstorm lists to people with your birth of your child, those things are important things of life. I know I do these videos and I probably miss out on a good bit of things, but I'm not completely oblivious to what exactly I'm doing and how it affects me. He says, my muscles ache for no reason. Sleep eludes me. I sit in my living room with the lights off and stare at the wall. When I manage to doze off, I am plagued by recurring dreams in which I'm trapped in a plummeting elevator or buried alive, unable to move. It may sound like torture, but it fills me with a sense of purpose and potency. This is what God must feel like when he's on a bender. This isn't an endorsement, by the way. It's the confession of an addict. Some people will say it shouldn't be like this, that making games shouldn't come with so high a price. And in a perfect world, maybe they'd be right. It's clear what kind of world we wish for. Its design has repeatedly appeared in our games for decades. Our perfect world is not devoid of struggle or opposition, but the path to victory is much more certain. Hard work always results in positive growth, a growth measured in strength and power. What once held us back can easily be overcome if we just put in the grind. So long as we keep working, we will continue to grow stronger. Our bodies will never flag or waver. We are forever young, and there is no obstacle we cannot overcome. Walt Williams, Mr. Walt Williams, my apologies. That's a load of shit. There's people out there that work extremely hard for the things that they want, and sometimes they never get it. In fact, there's people that out there that put in quote-unquote hard work, and they are just at the same spot that they've always been. Someone could come along right now, and even though I've put out a couple of videos, and not a lot there, but say they put out maybe 1 or 2 videos, and one of them happens to be a hit, and then they surpass me in subscriptions. Like, do you not see how they probably didn't work as hard as I did? You see, that doesn't make any sense for you. He continues, that's not our world. In this plane of existence, we are limited. We can accomplish almost anything, but only if we're willing to pay the price. It may not be fair, and it definitely won't be the same price quoted to someone else, but it will still need to be paid. In this industry, we all make sacrifices: love, life, health. Those things we're told we cannot live without. It's natural to wish things weren't this way, but it won't change anything. You either agree to the cost or move on with your life. Those who rail against it are either naive or bitter. They paid the price and didn't go as far as they hoped. That's the risk you take. Being an artist is not easy. Selling your soul will not always bear a profit. I've paid the price more than once. In return, I more or less got exactly what I wanted. I shouted into the void and the void shouted back, "We hear you." That puts me in a unique position to look back on the past 10 years and ask, was it honestly worth it? I don't know, but I know the price was fair. Oh, I'm glad we're done with that article, but I'm at least glad that he was able to round it up at the end and say that some people just haven't paid the price as high as you have. There are a lot of people in the world, and they all want something to go their way. They either want to be famous, or some people just want to be able to live to the next day or be able to pay their bills. The problem is that crunching isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and even you admit that in this article. Crunching doesn't necessarily mean that you'll yield the results that you want. Putting in time doesn't mean that you'll get exactly what you want. In fact, it's been a hot topic, especially in the Asian countries, especially in Japan, where you can be overworked and sometimes it actually kills people. I'll leave a link in the description below for the article, but it's called Death by Overwork: Pressure Mounts on Japan to Act. Essentially, in this article, it talks about Matsuri Takahashi, who jumped to her death from a company dormitory late in December 2015. She was being overworked, and the only way she thought out was for suicide. And they say that it was caused by serious depression that was triggered by overwork and harassment. In fact, there's actually a word for it in Japan named karoshi, which can be translated literally as overwork death. And these are the things that happen in just a couple of the Asian countries, but it still happens quite frequently here in America, where people just get overworked and they don't have any way of taking care of themselves, and then they commit suicide. Sometimes a lot of people don't have a lot of time to do things. Some manga artists are actually committed to their work. They love making the things because it's their vision, and even they don't have the time to really do anything outside of make it because they are committed to it. In fact, Super Eyepatch Wolf on YouTube he's a really good anime reviewer guy. I like his analysis on a lot of things, and I think most recently he had a video on the Fall of the Simpsons. I haven't gotten around to watching it, but I'm sure it has a lot of detailed analysis in it, and he points out a lot of the things that people will either go for in that series or what, happened to be the downfall of it. But in this video in particular, he outlines the Fall of Bleach, it used to be a really good show. In fact, it was actually one of my favorites at a point in time. But even in this video, it outlines how much time these manga artists actually have to themselves after they make a work of art.
In Yu Yu Hakusho Volume 5, author Yoshiro Tagashi wrote this formula to explain how much free time the average manga author has a week, where X is equal to days until deadlines, which is usually about 5 days considering that most authors write during the weekends. A is hours of sleep per day, 4 to 5 hours max, and P is pages of manga, usually between 19 to 21. And H is time spent per manga page, an average of about 4 hours per page. Take all that and minus the time spent eating, bathing, biological functions and other necessities, and Tagashi calculates that in an average week, he's left with about 3 to 4 hours of free time.
Yeah, I know, it's insane. These people are committed to their art, and they've made some of the most world-renowned pieces of art that I think most anime fans would actually appreciate. But even then, they have so little time to themselves that sometimes if they have to go on hiatus, it's understandable. Mr. Walt Williams, have you seen what people have said about your awesome article about how the crunch is actually good and why you praise it and worship it? Let me go ahead and read you a couple of those. This user wrote, This entire article / excerpt is like a person saying a blizzard isn't that bad and that it builds a character, while sitting next to a fireplace, drinking hot chocolate, and bundled up in flannel and blankets. Get fucked, Polygon. Sincerely, someone who nearly ruined their health because of crunch. People are not happy with you, Walt Williams. They do not like the things that you said because they are blatantly untrue. I know the article is named Why You Worship Crunch, but don't ever try to point it out as a positive. It's only a positive for the company that you work for because they're the ones making the money. And sure, you may get some of that money in return for working, but even then, sometimes some game developers actually don't get paid. Sometimes they have unpaid time. That's just a fact of life. Yeah, it definitely sucks. But that's what we have to change about it, is to make sure that people aren't just throwing their lives away, slaving over a piece of art, and then saying that we're fucking hypocrites because we complain that something isn't good. All in all, I think this has been a long enough video to truly express how I feel about how Polygon's way of writing and some of these people that they get to say these awful things, just, I can't even, my mind is just in a million places. This is awful. I'm not going to do my usual spiel at the end of this because this is, I would like to believe that it's a serious video, because these people, there are people out there that have lost their lives doing something for what they believe is the greater good, as Mr. Walt Williams has said. But if you're dealing with depression and you have suicidal thoughts, it's best that you talk to someone that you can open up to. You can even open up to me if you'd like. I'm always on Twitter. I'm sure you guys already know where I'm at by now. And if you ever really need to get to anything else, especially just to talk, you can always find me on Discord. But make sure that you talk to someone, maybe a family member or one of your best friends. Or I'm sure there's probably some communities and some hotlines out there that you can call in case you are feeling depressed and overworked. But make sure that you get some help. And we're always here for you.